being in Arizona and working on climate change, it's personal. We think about it every day. We think about 10 years from now, 20 years from now, will I still be able to be here? What will it look like? Will we build water infrastructure? And so it really brings it home for me to be able to work on both past, present, and future climate here in a place that is on the front lines of climate change. I'm Dr. Jessica Tierney. I'm a professor in the Department of Geosciences at the University of Arizona. And I'm a lead author on the recently released sixth assessment report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In the last several decades, there's always been a representative from the University of Arizona involved with the IPCC reports. So I'm the latest in a long tradition of Arizonan climate scientists participating in this global effort. The report that I was a part of is the first working group. In this report, we focus on assessing how climate has changed, so what has happened in the past, what's happening right now, and what will happen in the future under different emission scenarios. So a major difference from the report that came out in 2013 is the attribution of extreme events to human influence. That is new. So whenever we look back into the past and we find evidence of a warm climate, we always find that CO2 is high. It's always 1-for-1. CO2 and temperature. When CO2 is high, the planet is warm. When CO2 is low, it's cold, over and over again. CO2 is really the master dial on the Earth's climate system. There's a large range of what people call natural climate variability, changes in the climate that would occur without human interference. How do we separate that from what's related to human emissions? We can take a climate model and we can run it and see, what would have happened in the 20th century without humans. And what we find from that experiment is that since about 1950, humans are responsible for all of the increase in global temperatures. Humans are warming the climate faster than pretty much anything we know about in Earth history. The rate is truly unprecedented. So what that means is we're seeing climate move into a new state at such a speed that ecosystems, biomes, and people will struggle to adapt just because it's happening so fast. So if we look at where we're headed, already the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere are higher than anything we've seen in 3 million years. So this is why going back deep into geological history is really important. What happens to the water cycle? What places in the world experience more severe drought or more severe flooding? And so in order to do this, of course, we don't have thermometers that go back millions of years, right? So we have to use tricks from chemistry and biology to be able to go back in time and tell things like temperature and how wet or dry it is. So my research focuses actually on looking at fossil fats. So it turns out that fats are preserved in rocks for millions of years. They just don't break down. So if we take marine sediments, for example, they're actually algae, and they change the structure of their lipid fat cell membrane in response to the temperature of the water. And that fat is preserved in the mud. And so what we do in my lab is we'll go in and we will extract all these fats out of a sample. We'll focus on the one that we know responds to temperature, and we'll measure it. And so with that calibration, then we can take ourselves back into the past. Again, going back millions of years, we're able to tell what is the temperature of the surface ocean. Another class is actually based on the waxes that are produced by plants. Leaf waxes, we call them. So plants, their leaves are quite waxy. You might notice, especially in desert plants, that there's a thick layer of wax coating on a lot of our plants here in Arizona. So why are they interesting? Well, it turns out the chemical signature of the leaf waxes relates to the water cycle and can tell us something about how rainfall has changed in the past. So we have a big research project focused on understanding how the North American monsoon system has changed through time. This system accounts for about half of the rainfall that falls in Tucson. And so we really want to know how climate change is going to affect the monsoon. What we've seen so far is evidence that the monsoon system is more intense during past warm climates. Now, how does this weigh into the ongoing drought in the region? Problem is, even though rainfall is going up and down, temperatures are going up in Arizona. And as it gets hotter and hotter, the atmosphere becomes thirstier. So the atmosphere itself is demanding more moisture out of the soil. It's actually evaporating more moisture out of the soil and away from plants, and it makes the climate drier. This is a phenomenon we call hot drought because it can be driven by temperatures alone. You can still have precipitation go up and down year to year, yet see the emergence of this long-term drought. We're just gonna walk into the desert, see what we find. Of course, a lot of my students are really worried about climate change. And so they come into my class and we learn about how the Earth system works, all the climate changes that have happened in the past, and then what we might face in the future. And it's easy to get trapped into this sort of zone of despair. So what I do like to remind students of is there still is hope and we still have choices. I guess I'm sort of a practical optimist in the sense that I know that some of the trajectories might be too ambitious, but I also think there's great value in doing everything we can to get on a better trajectory. All these little different choices and engagements add up and they can make a difference moving forward.